Welcome to the podcast where we take a deep dive into the stories behind construction business leaders. We will share how they got started, how they found success, and the lessons learned along the way. I'm your host, Eric Fortenberry. Welcome to Builder Stories. All right, welcome back, everybody. Today, I'm doing an in-person live Builder Stories with my good friend, Darden-Hines. He is the owner-operator of Darden-Hines Design Build, located in Dallas, Texas. Really excited. Really appreciate you coming into the office today, Aaron. Welcome to Builder Stories.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So why don't you give us a little bit of background, who you are, how'd you get into construction, and what do you guys do?
I'm Darden-Hines. I own DHDB, and we started about eight and a half years ago. But my story started way before that in construction. My grandfather Darden is who the company was named after, and he's passed away for a little over a decade now. But he started taking me on job sites when I was about eight or nine, and learning commercial wall covering, residential wall covering, and it just progressed from there. So by the time I was 18, I had a little business with my brother doing remodeling. And then I went into the world of design, and mostly graphic design. And I just went through the gamut of, I did embroidery digitization. I did website design. I did signs for, like beer tackers. I did all kinds of stuff. And I was a design director for a museum exhibit firm here in Dallas. And I just loved that industry. And so after I left that position, I've always wanted to kind of come back into that world. And so I started Darden-Hines Design and Build to actually be in the museum industry. But I didn't want to call it, museum services or whatever, because I didn't want to pigeonhole myself and end up just kind of basically making it so difficult for me to find work. So I called it Design Build. Well, I didn't know at the time that there were construction companies that are called Design Build. And so I kind of just by proxy kind of fell into the residential space. And we started with, very small, meager jobs, and we're, about 8.5 years into it, and we've been pretty blessed.
That's awesome. So what's your average typical job look like today?
Typical job is, we do whole home remodels, we do structural additions, we do outdoor living spaces, including in-ground pools. And so, typical job, if we're talking dollars and cents, ranges between about 100 to 600, 700,000.
Nice. Yeah. And so you really grew up on the job site, at the age of 8. That's pretty early on. I'm curious, do you have any of those kind of early memories that just kind of flash back to you at times about being out there on the job site?
Well, I like to eat a lot. So a lot of my memories were around the times that my grandfather and I got to sit around and just share, a meal together. And so, his idea of a meal was cold hot dogs on 2 pieces of bread with some mustard, and that was a sandwich. But other than that, a big part of my life growing up on job sites was finding toys to play with. So there were many times where we were on a commercial site, and I would get like a long piece of conduit and some electrical caps, and I would screw a drywall screw into the electrical cap, and I would use it as a blow dart. So those are kind of some fond memories for me. But as far as the work is concerned, I was brought into it as a lackey, and pick up these scraps, and then eventually he started teaching me how to hang wall coverings, and I would hang them behind refrigerators and in kick areas of like a vanity space, and so like the place that no one would see, so I can make mistakes. Yeah. So,
and then I guess having that, that background in design, I mean, I feel like a lot of people don't fully appreciate what a good design eye can do for really anything, whether you're building a home, whether you're doing marketing, whether you're, creating, whatever it is, like having that design eye is so valuable. So it sort of makes sense that you would ultimately find your way into the design build arena. What would you say though, when you first started off, like thinking about those early projects, like how did those first projects that you do, and maybe tell us about one of those early ones and kind of how has it sort of evolved over those 8 years to what you're doing today? Because I imagine the projects today weren't anything like what they were early on.
No, so my actual literal first project for DHDB was I was a marketing designer for a friend of mine now who owns a stone quarry in San Saba, Texas. And he called me up one day and he said, "Hey, can you design a grocery delivery app?" And I was like, "What? Why?" And he said, "Well, I'm buying this grocery store in downtown San Saba." And I said, "Yeah, I can help you with that," which I'd never done before. And so I said, "Well, who's designing the grocery store? Who's helping you with traffic flow and signage and, where everything sits?" And he goes, "I don't have anybody. Do you want to do it?" And I said, "Yeah, actually, I just started this design build firm." And so, my thought process was I wanted to go into the museum industry. And so this is kind of similar to museum space where it's like you're designing the traffic flow of the space and you're designing, the signage of, talking about exhibits and this. Well, it just happens to be, a grocery store. So that was my first job. And he put me on retainer. And so then after that was done, it was like I came home because I was going to San Saba a lot. And so I came home, my wife's like, "Okay, what's next?" So started very meagerly after that. My first job was a patio roof enclosure that, I was just building the walls and doing a screened in porch basically. So it's like a $5,000 job. So going from that to what we're doing now is pretty crazy to me.
What's early on, how did you get the work done? Like, were you doing work yourself? Were you using trade partners? Did you have employees? Kind of how has that evolved?
I didn't know anything about anything. So, you don't know what you don't know. So I started out in a Scion XB. Do you know the little boxy Scion
Yeah.
vehicles? Which I figured out I could get 8-foot material if I fold the seats down, and I cracked a few windshields doing that. Yeah, so I would pick up a day laborer at the supermarket around the corner from now where my shop is, and we would go do jobs, just me and another guy. So it was, very hands-on, really didn't know how to charge for anything, didn't know how to account for anything. It was just kind of fly by the seat of our pants.
Where did those first customers come from?
Next door.
Okay.
Yeah, the app,
Yeah.
the neighborhood community app, and I still use it to this day. There's some good leads that come from that.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
So, I've found that those community-based apps, whether it's Nextdoor, Facebook, things like that, where you can join these groups and people are having real conversations and looking for, specific things or need help or trying to find a contractor. Like, when you can show up there and just offer advice, hey, this is kind of what I would do. Let me know if you're interested in, need some help. It does seem like a very organic, kind of natural way. And I think people really value when they see people who are involved in the local community, having them be able to hire you or at least consult with you, it's probably a good way to win some jobs.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just this last week, this happened where somebody asked on a Facebook group, it was like a mom's group or something, that they were having problems with their builder and they felt like they were getting screwed, and so they wanted to talk to somebody who might be able to help them finish this job. And I had several people that posted about me in the thread, and so these people reached out, and that was great, and we're still talking. But this other couple reached out to me, and it was almost like now all of a sudden, like I'm the expert in the room. Like I don't, and so they're like, "Well, we're having these issues and problems, and could you come look at our floor is buckling." And so here I am looking at the floor and saying, "Well, there's a problem. You're getting moisture from the back, your back, patio area." And they're like, "Well, we were wanting to do a patio roof cover." I'm like, "Well, I can help you with that." So it's kind of interesting, like what you said. I mean, it's those conversations get your foot in the door, and that's what I've always said about anything that we do. When we go on site and we meet with a client, it's never about just a bathroom. It ends up being so much more a lot of times. It's like, well, I do want to do this bathroom, but I also want to do this, and maybe this is in the future. And it's like, okay, we can help you with that. So yeah.
That's great. Would you say that over those, kind of 8 years, like, how have you grown your team, and how has that evolved? Like, tell us kind of what's the structure today? How many people are involved with you? How many projects are you running at one time?
So it's kind of, I don't want to say it's an ever changing, but we, we kind of built up, and I opened up a custom cabinet shop. And so we had that for about 4 years. This is one of the things I wanted to say on this podcast is, don't be afraid to look at something and go, this isn't working, and decide to scale back. Because sometimes I think we as business owners look at something and we go, well, we can't scale back because that's going to be viewed as failure or whatever. And sometimes you just have to make that decision. And so that's what I had to do with the cabinet shop. So unfortunately, fortunately, I had the foresight to go, hey, I'm losing money on this. And the hard part is I probably didn't do it soon enough. So lost quite a bit of money on that. But to be able to go, okay, I'm going to close it, and shut down that side of our shop and relinquish that back to our landlord. And I had to lay off our cabinet maker and our finisher. So it's 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 ever fluctuating in that way. So it's myself, which I handle 100% of the sales, and business development and all of that kind of stuff. And then my daughter-in-law is our director of administration. So she actually is our JobTread administrator. So it's like when you look at the list of who we have in JobTread, she has all the badges. So she knows more about what you guys do than I do. So I rely on her a lot. And we have an interior designer who's our director of design, in-house. And we had two project managers, and it's kind of been over the last couple of weeks, things have kind of evolved and changed, so that now we only have one project manager. So one of our guys, and I always tell all of our people, if you have something else that's out there that means something to you, and that means, more success for you or whatever, don't let me stand in your way. I encourage you to go, take care of yourself and your family. And so that's what happened. Our project manager, Carl, he ended up finding another position, and it's actually with with our HVAC crew. So it's not like I'm never going to see Carl again, and we're still great friends, and and everything happened amicably. So it's kind of, there's just this fluctuation. So as of right now, it's the four of us: myself, Kennedy, who's our director of admin, Paige, our interior designer, and Abdiel, who's our project manager.
Okay. So then you're using all, subcontractors, trade partners to
All trade partners for everything else. Yeah.
and has that sort of been how you've done it all along?
No. So that's and Carl and I were just talking about this yesterday, actually. When I brought Carl on, that was the first time that I brought someone on to help me run the business. Prior to that, it was always me running a crew of guys. So like I would like hire people, or I would, and I had different guys that did different things. And we mostly did all the work ourselves. Like I didn't have any subcontractors. So if we're laying floor, we're laying floor. And I mean, even had my son working for me, for a period of time, and helping out, doing stuff, and my daughter. I mean, like, it's just like kind of a family affair almost. But when I hired Carl, that's when things kind of started to change. And so in the beginning, Carl's kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? Like a Swiss Army knife, yeah, jack of all trades. And so he kind of came in and he was helping do, different things as we're kind of evolving and shaping and molding. But then eventually it became, hey, we're trying our hardest to do all subcontract work. And, you manage the job, I sell the job, and we go forward. So,
What I'm hearing, and what I think is a really important lesson here is that, again, you started off kind of taking whatever you could. You're wearing every hat. You're selling the job. You're managing the job. You're literally, working with your hands to get the job done. And you've kind of gone down a few avenues. You've done a really good job. It sounds like of being able to continually reevaluate what's working, what's not working, and most importantly, being able to make the tough decisions to, like the cabinet shop, we got to pull back. That's not working. It's stretching you too thin. Because I see a lot of people who, as entrepreneurs, we naturally just keep putting on every hat. We think, we can do it the best. It's hard to learn to delegate, to trust, and really, it's hard to learn what we shouldn't be doing and where is not a good use of our time. And I see so many, construction business owners who literally just burn themselves out, continuing to do the same thing over and over, even though it's not working. And yet they just expect a different outcome one day. And, that's just not how it works, right? Like that I think leads to a lot of, mental challenges, mental health issues, like
it's the definition of insanity. What I just said. Yeah, yeah.
insanity. Yeah. So, I think that's a great, again, a great lesson that, like, as leaders, as business owners, like, we can't be scared to make those tough calls, to pivot and go in a different direction. I think that's just naturally how businesses evolve, right? And then the people who are the best at being able to continually adopt and change and mold and grow, like, those are the ones who survive. It's not like it's this like linear path that, like, we're going to start at the bottom, we're just going to go straight up. It's like being on a roller coaster. We're going up, we're going down, we're going up, we're going down. And, like, I think I'm hearing that, you have done a good job of just, continually reevaluating, keeping a good pulse on the business and what's working and what's not.
Well, there's so many things in there that I want to talk about. One is when you're talking about the roller coaster, I remember this graphic that I saw that's like, be an entrepreneur. And it's like, yeah, no, it's everything's great. And then, oh my God, I'm going to lose my company. And then, oh yeah, it's awesome. And, it's like, that's literally what it means to own a business. I mean, and so it's just part of the thing. And I'm glad that you talked about or kind of touched on mental health. I think that that's something that's more important to our industry than what people really understand and believe. As far as us understanding our mental health, us, setting boundaries in place to keep our sanity. One of the things that I do to try to keep my sanity is I try not to work past work hours. And if someone's reaching out to me in the middle of the night, I might send a text with a send later type of thing, but I don't send it until the next morning. And I try not to engage with people in off hours because that's a boundary that I'm trying to set for myself, because you can go crazy really quick, dealing with stuff constantly. And then I think, a lot of times, and I'm not. This isn't a gender issue that I think, but I believe that women are more in tune with themselves emotionally, and they can recognize when they might need help. And as men, we just get so proud, and we're like, I don't need help, and I don't need that. And so, uh, I really think it's important for us to talk about this and say, hey, it's okay to go talk to a talk therapist and talk about, what's going on in your life. I've done that. And actually my old therapist was right on the other side of 635 from your building. And, I went through talking about my fear of water. I've grown up with a fear of water. I've talked about, my, church hurt. I've talked about, my business a lot, relationships. And so it's, it's certainly healthy, though it's not inexpensive sometimes, but it's healthy for us to be able to suss these things out And even if it's a scenario of reaching out to other builders or other tradespeople, to kind of create this network of um, camaraderie and brotherhood, sisterhood, and that's something that I'm really trying to do as well. Because it's my thing is that I don't believe that many of us need to be in direct competition with each other. There's so much work. It's like we can support each other. We can, so I have a really good friend who shops next door to us, who he's become one of my best friends. And he is a custom home builder. And so like we really talk to each other from time to time, and I'll call him and say, "Hey man, I'm dealing with this. I don't know how to deal with it," and he'll say, "Well, this is what I did when and so we support each other in that way. So
That's awesome. I think you're spot on. I mean, as so many people, one, I think a lot of people in this industry feel like they're in this alone.
Right.
And really, I don't necessarily think like that's specific to construction. I think just in general, as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as you grow and scale, you feel lonely at the top. And I think it's kind of just that natural sort of feeling, everything rolls to you, all the challenges, you hear all of the hardest things in the business, and I think that it's so important that people go and find, whether it's, someone to talk to, whether it's a therapist, whether it's having good communication with their spouse, their partner back home, like, whether it's finding a community to get involved in, like, there are so many of us out there. And at the end of the day, like, finding that tribe, finding that community, I think that's one of the really neat things about JobTread is that the JobTread pros and the community that has gotten formed around, what we're doing here is the thing that I never saw coming, but like just seeing people helping each other and being there for each other and giving people that outlet to say, man, I'm struggling with this, and like to just like instantly get, feedback from people who have that sort of that fresh perspective that I'm just kind of looking in and here's what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, like, like that's so valuable. And I encourage everyone, to really think about like how can you go get involved with local groups, with, online groups, with, whoever it may be, like that like at the end of the day, like you're not in this alone and you don't have to go at it alone. I think it's about the getting comfortable with yourself and being able to, just put down your walls. Like the more you ask for help, the more you can get comfortable just being open and transparent with your team or whoever else is in your life, the quicker you can come up with solutions and you can hopefully try to address those things. But, life is too short to sit here and keep, just drilling ourselves into the ground. Like if something's not working, like just confront it, change, do something. Don't keep doing the same thing. So, I think that's awesome. And you're so right too about like this, competitive nature. Like, I see so many people who think like, oh, I can't talk to that guy. He's our competitor. And like, the reality is there's more demand than there is supply. And we need to have this abundance mentality instead of the scarcity mentality. And like, you end up finding people who are like, man, like you shared that idea, and I went and I started talking to the other builders in the area, and we found that like we actually target different, types of projects or different customers or different size projects. And like they've now set up referral programs with each other where if a job comes in, it's not a good fit, they refer it to that other guy and vice versa. And like it's such a great partnership.
absolutely. Well, it's okay. So my buddy next door, his name's Randall, and before we moved, so we have the shop on one side of the building. It's like a big row of double shops on either side of the building. He was on the opposite side, and I just kind of knew about him, but I didn't really know him. I'd never met him. And we have number 7, and we ended up getting into number 8, and that's where we opened up the cabinet shop. And so the first day, like one of the first days we were moved into the number 8, this red truck pulled up, and I see this guy get out, and my thought process is this guy's a jerk. That's what I was thinking, because I know he's another builder. This guy's a jerk. I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to have a friendship with him. And we're competitors. And honestly, Randall's the person who opened my eyes to this concept of we don't have to be in in conflict with each other.
Sure.
And I remember when we first had our first conversation, we talked in the parking lot for an easy 45 minutes. And when I got home that day, I told my wife, I said, I think I might have just met my new best friend. And I mean, and it's true. I mean, like, we have become fast friends and very supportive, but the, you know, the whole concept of being, in competition with everybody else, first off, is not true. Second off, it's tiring, and it's like, if you're able to develop these relationships, like what you just said, it's like, hey, I might not be able to handle this job and you can, or vice versa. So, I think these kinds of relationships, I think, are really important for us as builders, to develop. Like, for instance, Randall told me one day, he's like, "Hey, I think what you should do is start reaching out to architects." And I said, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea." So I just started reaching out to architects, and I got a guy who responded to me and went on a job site and looked at some stuff, and so it was interesting because then, Randall's talking to me about struggles that he's having. I'm like, "Well, have you given yourself your own advice, or have you taken your own advice?" And he's like, "No." I'm like, "Well, why not?" You know? So it's just this reciprocal, you know, um, not game, but reciprocal, idea of being able to, really help each other.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now I want to shift a little bit here because, again, I've known you for a long time. I know you wear your heart on your sleeve. You're very passionate about what you do. You care deeply about other people. You know, I'm curious to kind of dive in a little bit about how, you build your relationships with your clients. And, to some extent, I've heard you share that, you've you sometimes struggle, with, that change order or with that invoice because, you feel like it didn't go exactly how you had hoped, or you feel like, it wasn't quite perfect. And so, like, can you tell us just a little bit more about, how do you go into these relationships with your clients? And then what have been these struggles that you've had, over the years, kind of, balancing, like, that notion of, perfection, meeting expectations, and sort of how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, I mean, the hard part for me in my relationship with my clients is that I always look at it as, these are my new friends, and I don't know that they look at it that way, but I look at it, like, I know these people, and I'm like, and I'll say this, one of the things that I heard from somebody somewhere was, like, the most emotional word in the English language is home. And so when we're being brought into someone's home, it's a very emotional situation for them, especially if they're trying to live through a remodel, and I mean, it's just it's terrible sometimes. So I I have this hard juxtaposition of wanting to serve them professionally and make sure that everything's getting done correctly, but also, kind of like you said, wearing my heart on my sleeve, where it's like, oh, that's gonna hurt their pocketbook. Like, there's a whatever happens, and it's like, oh, that's another okay. Case in point, I have a client right now. We're close to the end of the job, and we determined that there's so many bad things that are happening in his breaker panel that it really needs to just be replaced and redone. So it's like, $10,000. And I'm, having to go to this client going, I, I'm I'm sorry, it is what it is. And I feel for you. And I know that this is like adding insult to injury, but we're going to have to do this. And of course, he's asking me for a second opinion, and that's what we're going to do, that, and make sure that we're doing it correctly. But it's so hard. It's hard for me because it's like, not that I have the money to spend, or to give someone, but it's like I almost want to, well, I'll just take care of it. And that's gotten me in trouble in the past where, I've looked at something and I go, well, it's not really the client's fault. Whose fault is it? I've read this book, Extreme Ownership, and there's other books that go along with that. But the idea of if anything goes wrong with your company, whose fault is it? Ultimately, it's mine, you know? And it's like you here, ultimately it's yours, you know, because you run the company. And and so as business leaders, it's, you know, it's difficult for me to go, well, it's this guy's fault, you know. Well, let's be honest. Is it his fault because I didn't train him correctly? Is it his fault because of, you know, whatever? And so it usually comes back to me. And so that's the hard part for me is um weighing that to where it's like, you know, obviously I'm in business to make money, but I also want to help people. But I all, you know, and so it's like, you know, hearing like Tom Reber talk about 50% or what the yeah, like 50% profit margin, you know. And it's like, yeah, that's a lofty goal to me, because I don't know if in my market, I don't know if that's possible. And what I do, you know, I mean, he was doing painting and that kind of stuff, so it's like kind of maybe easier on a single trade. But when I'm doing, you know, like multiple trades and general construction, it's you know, maybe kind of difficult to do. So it's like, yeah, I want to make money, but I also want to serve my clientele well, you know? So sometimes, there's a fight there, you know, an internal fight that I have to go through kind of on a daily basis.
I see a lot of contractors though who just they struggle to leverage change orders, and they just want to keep saying yes to everything, and it's like at the end of the day, like, that's it's just not feasible to do that. It's the fastest way for you to drive your business into the ground is if you're taking all that profit and giving it right out. I mean, like you got to make money to be able to continue investing in the business and continue growing. So I do think it's something that a lot of people struggle with. And again, when you care so deeply about your clients and making sure that they have the most successful project possible, it's a real struggle.
So I'll say, and this is kind of talking some technicalities about JobTread. I I didn't learn how to correctly do change orders, probably not until like the last few weeks, honestly. And so it's like when I went back, like I was doing change orders and I was attributing new line items to old line items instead of making new line items, right, in the change order. And so then it became really confusing from a perspective of, like how the end accounting worked, you know. And it was like, and I was so frustrated with it. And I remember talking to Kennedy about it, and we were just discussing it. And it was like a light went off my head. Oh, I did this wrong. And that's one of the reasons why I have kind of resisted change orders, because it's like they've always been confusing to me, and they've been hard to, like, for me to put into the, well, I was doing it wrong. So, you know, the thing with change orders for me is, and I always say this in our contracts, is, if you as a client come up with a different scope, that's a change order. If we as the contractor run into something that we didn't know is behind a wall, that's potentially a change order. There are many times, and that's when I get into this juxtaposition of, you know, uh, one of our contractors made a mistake on something, well, that's my fault, so I can't necessarily change order the person for it. But sometimes that might include something extra that the client wants. And so then it like just gets thrown in, and then I don't change order on it, and then I lose that money. So it's it's tough. Like, so what we're trying to do now is we're we're trying to take the lead of some other companies that we have seen, specifically at Connect and other places, but um, to like try to take out all the guesswork that we can in the beginning, so our change orders are much less. So we don't have that juxtaposition to deal with as much. Um, and it's a work in progress. So we're still. I mean, I'm 8.5 years in, and we're still developing systems and processes. Yeah.
I mean, I think, like you discussed earlier, I mean, like being able to provide very clear definitions, and what is included, what is excluded, what will result in a change order, I think when you've laid that groundwork going into the project, it does make it a little bit easier later to sort of just fall back to, hey, here's how I said it would work. For better or for worse, this is in the change order category. We're happy to do it. It is going to require us to adjust our schedule. We're gonna have to take into account, these changes, and could result in design changes. And there's this cascading, set of effects that can happen when changes are coming up at mid project. But in construction, the sure thing that we know is going to happen is the unknown.
Right.
And it's just the reality of how projects. Yeah, you're opening up walls and have no idea what's back there. So it is real, and I think again, it's to the extent that you can really educate on the process and educate on when would result in a change order. I think that's so helpful. Um, I've seen other strategies too, where again, like it's kind of building in that buffer. Whether it's contingencies, whether it's kind of initially pricing at a much higher profit margin, knowing that you may end up eating into that a little bit when things come up that could kind of be on the line. Like, well, is that on me? Is it on the client? Because there is a lot of gray area there. And I think at the end of the day, like what I think what everyone needs to remember is that your reputation is number one. The customer's success and their experience, that's number one. There are a lot of things that you can put before profits.
Right.
And taking care of your client, when you give your word for something, I mean, you got to honor it, and a lot of times, I think the contractor sort of can blur the line of, well, it really was my screw up, but like, here's an opportunity to get a change order and I'm going to go ahead and do it. I think at the end of the day, like if you screwed up, you got to own it. If it's in that gray area, if it's a nominal amount, it's not going to move the needle. Like look for those small wins though, that can have a meaningful impact so that they know and they don't feel like you're just trying to nickel and dime them at every corner, right? I mean, it's about, the bigger things though, that like you can't run a business just giving everything away.
No, absolutely not. Well, so we have more recently gone from basically having zero scope, like zero written scope, to actually having written scope and saying, and being able to have those kind of conversations with the client and saying, they say, well, you didn't do this. And I say, well, let's look at the scope, And so, oh, well, that wasn't in the scope. So how do you want us to handle it? Like I'm happy to do it and deal with whatever, you need us to do, but that's not in the original scope, So the more that we get in writing and with contracts and, and a scope list and proposals and all that, it just makes that end of the business a little easier, and that's something that, that these are processes and, structure that we're continually working on and building into our system. And I want to say this about our system. Our system is JobTread. It's the reason why I'm sitting here with you. Let's be honest. And I wanted to say to you that, I know that I'm between 100 and 200 on the customer lists, right? So it was, what do you say, July something of 21.
21, yep.
And, which I didn't start using it immediately because back then y'all didn't have daily logs. You didn't have a time clock. You didn't, I mean, like, and it was like, these are pieces that I needed and that I was using on another system that shan't be named. And I, like looking back at that and looking at where you guys are now, I'm first off, I'm flabbergasted by how y'all have grown as much as you've grown, and the power that this tool represents. Like this is the greatest tool that I've ever purchased. Honestly, I mean it hands down is the greatest tool I've ever purchased, and I hold with pride that I was kind of an early subscriber. Not as early of an adopter. Took me about a year or so to really start using the program, and I honestly I'm still kind of learning it and figuring it out. But hearing from Travis the other day that y'all hit over 10,000 accounts at IBS, across from your one of your biggest competitors. Ridiculous. And that's so awesome. I'm so happy for you guys. I'm so proud of you guys, and it's like I feel like when I talk to other builders, like I'm an evangelist for what you guys do. But and I think I just took myself off track from what you just talked about, but I just wanted to mention that because anyone who's watching this probably knows how valuable JobTread is, but I think it needs to be underlined, you know?
No, I appreciate that. And again, not exactly sure what we sold you back in 2021 because I know the majority of the product wasn't there, but you lived in our neighborhood, so we just kept knocking. But
Yeah.
I think it's important to note that, like, because just like you, I mean, one, you're running a business, you're a business owner, you're very busy. It's something that, when people look at the full feature set today, it can be overwhelming. And I think it's important that people understand that, like, you don't have to implement everything day one. It's about creating a prioritized list of, like, what is the most immediate need that we need to address and we need to solve, and dig into that, master that, like, understand, and incorporate that into your systems and processes and how you run the business. And then as you grow and as those, additional opportunities open up to pick up another piece, you can incorporate this. So it's not like, you just like snap your fingers and bam, the whole thing's like up and running. And I think a lot of people sort of expect that. And that's not the case. It's about kind of growing into it and having a system that can grow with you and that can be continually improved, implemented, adopted. Like, it's not this, like, kind of like we got to get it all in and we got to get it all in on day one.
Right.
It's about kind of going and finding those little wins along the way that can make you incrementally better, day after day, month after month. So I think, to the extent that, like, you don't have to, feel like you're
Right.
behind or you're not getting adopted. It's about, looking at the wins and finding those small wins and kind of taking it, bite size, at a time.
Well, for instance, I would encourage everybody watching this to attend Connect next year, and the next year, and the next year. I've been going to Connect since the beginning, and I missed 1 year, which was last year. And I'm sad that I missed it. And so I'll say this year at Connect, I learned about that I didn't even know this is possible in the system, which is sad because it's probably been a thing for a while. But I didn't know that you could customize your dashboard. And when I saw that, and I saw, and I was like in one of the breakout sessions, and I was like, what? Like, what? How did I not know about this? And it's one of those things where I have to remind myself that I'm I'm running a business. I'm I'm trying to pull in as much money as I can. Our project manager is trying to spend as much money as he can, and our director of administration is trying to keep as much money as she can. And so, a lot of times we don't have time to do some of the trainings that you guys do, and it's one of those things where it's like looking after I let that slip out of my mouth, I go and I think to myself, okay, Aaron, w- like you just said that this is the most valuable tool you've ever purchased. So why would you not make time to figure out how to use it more efficiently? You know? So that's, I'm kinda, I'm saying that for the benefit of everybody, but I'm saying it for the benefit of myself. Like, I'm understanding that I'm I'm lacking in some areas that I need to focus on and pay attention to.
I think it is about just dedicating, time
Right.
to learning, to training, and again, regardless what tool. I mean, if you buy a new tool, for the job site, like, you can't just, like, give it to your guy and say, go use it. Like, we got to spend time, learning and understanding and really figuring out how do you maximize the value of this tool. And so, we've started seeing, people where they'll they have kind of, a dedicated block of time, whether it's, maybe, when you're first starting, it's, once a week. Maybe it's, every Friday morning or Friday afternoon, or, one day a week. And then, maybe as you kind of, get into it and you've been here for years, like maybe it's, once a month, you and your team sit down and, kind of go through all the new updates. Like, it's just about kind of like, you know, time management, and taking the time, away from the daily hustle of every single day, day after day. We're doing the same thing on the job site. Like, you have to take a little bit of time for the professional development, as well as for the team building, for the culture, like coming together and saying, hey, let's take a step back for a second. Like, what could we do better? What could we improve on? Where are we lacking? Like, what do we need to grow? I think like that time is so valuable. And when I ran the construction company, every Wednesday, or sorry, the first Wednesday of every month is when we had our all hands, team meeting. Like, we brought in all of our trade partners, all of our team. We brought in breakfast, and we had, 2.5 hour meeting where, first part, we're kind of, we're feeding them. We're going over team updates, kind of just what's happening, how are we doing, what's working, what's not. And then the second part of the meeting was all about, some sort of professional development, whether, we had one of our partners or our suppliers, or, someone coming in and just like providing education and training so that like we could all continue to level up. I think it's very important that people sort of find that right cadence for them, but don't forget that, again, sometimes you do have to take a step back, step away from the job site to invest in the business, the team, the tools, and that will help you go so much faster, when you can kind of keep continually improving.
That's exactly the word I was thinking while investment. Like, it's an investment. And that's one of the things that I have to remind myself, is that this is an investment. And what do you expect? Is you expect a return on your investment. And I can promise anyone else and myself that if I invest more time in training like that, the returns are gonna be, amazing.
That's the interesting thing, right? Because we have kept JobTread so affordable, a couple $100 a month, like, that really is a nominal amount. The real investment is your time.
Right.
Like, that is the true investment. And again, it doesn't really matter what system you bought, what tool you bought. Like, you have to invest the time to master your craft and to master your systems. And I think that's, where a lot of people probably don't allocate enough of their time to thinking through, what are our standard operating procedures? Like, documenting that, like documenting how the business is run, because, God forbid, like any one of us gets hit by a bus, like, we can't let that be the end of this business, right? Like, if we need to hire people and bring them on, the more time that you have spent up front documenting that onboarding process, documenting how the business operates, how do we sell, how do we price, how do we, execute our jobs, how do we do our invoicing, how do we close out jobs, like having that already documented gives everyone the playbook, so that when something doesn't go as expected, you've got something to fall back on and say, well, here's where our process broke down. Here's what we should do differently. And I just, again, like building a business, like no one knows from day one how to do it.
Right.
We learn, we grow, we figure out, we adopt, we overcome, and to the extent of just like it's about continual improvement.
Right.
And I think that's where, again, all of us and every business out there needs to allocate that time to learning, to growing, to developing and improving over time, because, things change.
Right.
Technology changes, the industry's changing, the economy's changing. Like, I think just finding ways to invest in ourselves and our team and our systems is huge.
Well, I think, and just hearing you go through all of that, there's a few things that come to mind. One is how much I appreciate Connect, JobTread Connect. That, like, we can have an intensive, several day process of learning the system, but not just learning the system. And what I really appreciate about what you guys do with Connect is you're bringing in people to, to lift us up, and to give us ideas of where to go next, and, and how to handle certain situations. And that brings me to the book that you wrote with Randy. It's called Builder's Story. Builder's Story. Builder's Choice. Right. Okay. This is Builder's Story. Builder's Choice. So I've read it, and even gave a little nice review on Amazon. And uh, it's a great book. It's a really good book, and it kind of defines what you just talked about, is the difference between a contractor who uh, really has no process, and then a contractor who has a process and has a team and has, and understands that if he doesn't have things in writing, he can't go back and tweak the process because he doesn't have it in writing, and that's one of the things that I've talked about with our project manager, that, hey, look, we can't have our processes, and our strategies live in our brain. Like we have to have it to where it's written and it's repeatable. And, like for instance, one of my guys, he wants to start a plumbing division. And I'm like, okay, but what we need to do is make sure that you're as a um as a project manager, that your processes and systems are developed so that we can repeat that. Hire somebody else to go into your space, so then you could go and do this. If you want to do a plumbing division, yeah, sure, let's do it. So, yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because that's something that I think, for me, was the dividing line between kind of being an amateur at what I'm doing and being more of a pro at what I'm doing, is really focusing on those systems and processes. So,
That's also what I love about Connect too, is it's like, you can come to our trainings all day long, and, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person, but like, it's just such a great opportunity to bring in others from the industry who have been there, who are doing it, who, can literally share, their best practices, share what's worked, what's not worked. Like, like I said earlier about, like, getting involved in a community and learning from others. The whole point of this Builder Stories podcast is so that other people can learn from others who have already gone through some of the challenges that they may be facing or they may be about to face, and try to, figure out how can we, maybe just jump right over that. How, what can we do today to prevent, making that same mistake, and I think that's just, there's so much value in taking that time to learn from others. And so it's super awesome to have so many great, people who are willing to come and present and share and open up their systems, open up their books. Like, just, they're so, giving of their knowledge and their insight and their expertise. And, it's very rare. Like, it is. And it's just, you don't see that happen that much. And I wish it happened more, because that's how, as a whole, as an industry, we can all raise each other up. We can all help each other. And that's going to help improve the, the perception, to the end customer of, what it's like to work with a contractor.
right.
There's that, small, few bad apples that, those, situations where they, take the money and run, where they leave the client high and dry. Like, even if that doesn't happen, the majority of the time, or even that often, it's those 1, 2, 3 times that it does happen, the story gets amplified,
Yep.
and that's what gets blown up, and then it creates this fear, but like, I'm such a big believer that, like, doing a construction project, like, this should be exciting.
Right.
This is like, you are like, changing, your life. You're changing your dwelling. You're changing, how your day to day. Like, I mean, it arguably makes a bigger impact than most anything else you could do is your living environment.
Right.
And so, like, you want people to have that excitement going in. And I think that we got to keep, working together and learning from each other and sharing the best practices, what works, what doesn't work. And that's how we can all get better. And so obviously I'm super passionate about that, and think that there's a big opportunity for all of us.
Well, I find that interesting that you say all that, because at Connect, there was a breakout session that was, several people got up and talked about how they were using JobTread. And one of them was another builder from my area. And you've had him on the podcast. It's Herman Guerrera. Guerrera? Yeah. And so we've never met. His design center is literally right across the street from my house. Like, and so it's one of those things where it's like, I've always wanted to connect with him, but I never really felt like, like, just there was a way for me to just reach out, organically. And so after that session, I, sent him a text and I was like, "Hey, you don't know me, but, or you might know me, you might know of my name because we're in the same area, but I'd like to get to know you, and I appreciate the session that you shared, and what he shared was really kind of cool how he's using the dashboard to kind of present to clients, on site. And so we kind of connected over text, and we haven't officially connected yet, but that's probably on me. I need to, I've just been busy. But yeah, so it's like one of those things of we can lift each other up. Okay, I'll give you another case in point. I was in Daltile one day, and there's a builder friend of mine who happened to be in there, and I didn't recognize him, and I'm talking to somebody, and he says my name, and I turn and I go, "Brother, what's up?" And we hugged, and the people front and behind the counter at Daltile were gobsmacked. They're like, "Y'all shouldn't either care about each other or know each other or certainly hug." And I'm like, "This is my brother from another mother." And I think that as we as contractors can continue to build those relationships with each other and lift each other up, you know, um, I think we will potentially change our industry. So it's like, I love that I can see Herman's business and that it's doing well and he gets really great reviews. And that helps me. It doesn't hurt me. It helps me because if he was out screwing people over, that's what hurts me, because then I have to walk into a place and try to explain to someone else after they've just gotten screwed over by somebody, how I'm not gonna screw them over. And so it's just, yeah, it's a sicu a s what's the word I'm looking for? A cyclical system, where we can really truly help each other.
So I wanted to kind of transition just a little bit because I know, one topic that that we've had that is a big challenge for contractors is cash flow. And I know that you've had some challenges with cash flow before. Obviously you started up that carpentry, had to shut it down, racked up some debt, you know, so many times when that happens, that is the death of the business. And that is the point where people throw in the towel. Cash flow can kill you.
Yep.
And I'd love a little bit of insight and how have you managed that? How have you been able to persevere through, that extra weight that got put on your shoulders and what advice would you give to others?
M I I don't wanna say my situation is unique by any means. Everybody deals with cash flow issues. I think for me, it has been kind of a conglomeration of, you know, missteps on projects and losing money here, and and then also like having the cabinet shop and losing money there. And so yeah, we're carrying debt, and I have to remind myself, as you know any any business out there that's worth their weight is probably carrying debt, and it's just kind of part of the structure of business and how you roll and go back and forth. And but as far as the pure cash flow is concerned, a lot of it has been, uh, and I don't wanna bring faith into it too much, but I'm very very faith oriented, and so a lot of it has been God doing for me what I can't do for myself. Because there are days where I think, okay, that's it. I'm gonna have to, throw in the towel and bankrupt or whatever, and then something comes in. And it's almost like I have, kind of received the message of calm down, just wait, like things are going to correct themselves. And my buddy Randall has always said to me, "Hey, the only way you fail is if you stop." That's the only way you can fail at what you're doing is if you stop. And so that's one thing that I really kind of held with me is I can't stop. I got to keep going. And some days are better than others. And I wish that I could have like a little uh, like a miracle of, hey, this is how you fix cash flow issues. I don't know that I know that, and maybe there are other people out there that know that, but I think that it's one of those things where as business owners, we have to figure it out, we have to figure out how that looks. And, one of the things that, I spoke with an investor the other day, and he said, Aaron, he said, you shouldn't be worried about your cash flow this month or next month. He said, you should be thinking about your cash flow in February of 2027. Like, this should already be dealt with now. You should be looking for talking about your cash flow next year. And that was a concept that I just kind of blew my mind. And I'm like, what? Like how? But these are things that I think I will, I said to somebody the other day, if I stop learning, I'm dead. Right. So I know that I'm just going to be continually learning. And that's just part of this process.
Yeah. And again, it's actually, I think, pretty good advice from that investor. I mean, it's about, today, right? I mean, we have to make sure that we are setting our jobs up in a way where we've got a payment schedule. We're collecting up front and along the way. We're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. Like, everything should be self-sufficient within each project. And it's important that, you're not coming out of pocket to prepay for things that, like, you should have collected, money for at a prior stage. But I think kind of looking at that longer term horizon, I mean, that's where, as you grow, it becomes more and more important as the dollars get larger and larger for the business. That, like, that's where you need that annual budget. That's where you need to be doing the forecasting and the planning and making sure that, knowing what your goals are every month, every quarter, every year, like, being able to, like, make sure, are we staffed correctly? When can we afford to bring on people? Again, the more people, the more payroll. I mean, that is a huge outflow of money, and you got to make sure that they're generating the income. Yeah. And bringing it in so that, like, it all sort of works out from a modeling standpoint. And again, that's something that, like, probably almost no construction business owner, would know from day one. That the first step is survive. If you can make it past year one, year two, like, okay, now let's start planning the much longer term. But as you grow, that first million's the hardest, and then the next million, and, like, it does get, easier, but you have a different set of challenges. And at the same time, as you grow larger, the projects grow larger, you're taking on more projects at the same time. Like, your risk, from a cash flow standpoint, is also increasing. And so I think that's probably where that advice of, like, how do you, forecast and plan in the future months is very, very important. But again, I think back to, how did you survive through this? It was your mindset, and the fact that, like, you could appreciate that there are going to be hard times. There are going to be good times and bad times, right? And I think, like, what I've learned as an entrepreneur is that, like, you have to learn to appreciate the journey. If everything was just, kind of this linear, or this, kind of just flat line, like, probably be a little bit boring. Like, those ups are good, but, like, those downs, like, at the end of the day, like, it's like, you got to just know that, like, man, like, we're going through a challenge right now. I'm going to make a list. I'm going to prioritize that list. I'm going to do the blocking and tackling, whatever I got to do to work myself out of this. But it's those moments that make you appreciate those ups and those highs. And it makes it that much better when you can look back and say, man, I thought I was dead in the water, and look at what I've overcome. Look at what our team overcame. You can celebrate those moments and those triumphs. And, like, I think that's the real excitement about being an entrepreneur. I mean, like, we're risk takers, and if this was easy, everybody would do it, and so I think that's, like, it's so much comes down to mindset, and not letting any one thing, cripple you emotionally, or mentally, to the point where, like, you just want to throw in the towel and give up. I mean, that might be the easy thing to do, but, like, looking back in life, like, you're not going to be able to celebrate that I quit. It's about, making the tough, calls. It's about, again, you had to pull back on the cabinet business. You may have had to let some people go. You may have had to, invest in things that, you didn't want to have to invest in, but you did it anyway. Like, those are the businesses that truly grow and scale and succeed, and a lot of times people looking in, they don't see all that, right? Like, they just see, oh, everything looks all fine and dandy from the outside. That guy looks like he just, he lucked into it, or he inherited it, or he, whatever it is. And, like, that's not how it happens the majority of the time. It's a lot of grit, determination, hard work, and I see that in you, and I want to tell you that, like, I appreciate that, and I think that it's important for other people to hear, what you have had to go through to keep this business going and to keep it growing. But again, it's not easy, and it's what worked to get you here is not gonna be the same thing that's gonna get you there. You just got to keep growing, keep learning. I love the thought of, man, if I'm not continuing to learn and grow, then I'm dead.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, so I'll say, you know, last year, our pastor like encouraged us to give up something for, it wasn't Lent, but something of that nature. And it's like prayer and fasting. So I gave up TV and, watching TV for a month. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do? Well, I started reading books. I've never read books much. Like I could probably count on both hands how many books I've read prior to last year, and maybe one hand. But last year I read, I think it was like 26 books, which is huge for me. And one of those books was called The Practicing Mind, and it's basically this guy's I think he's a bass player or something, but and he's also, I can't remember what all he was into, but businessman and artist. But he was talking about learning to love the process. And if you can't learn to love the process, then why are you even doing anything? So it's like I tell myself, it's like you have to you have to love the process of what you do here, because if you didn't, there's no way you could survive doing this. It'd probably drive you crazy. And I feel the same way about myself. So, that's one of the things that what you just said brought up for me. Um, and then the other thing, and now I can't remember my point. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Well, look, I think again, as we sort of come to close here, like, you've shared a lot of insight. I'm curious if you'd like to maybe just kind of leave everyone with any final, advice that you would give to others who maybe earlier on in their career, they're going through some of the challenges that you've had. Like, is there anything that you know now that you wish you would have known, 8 years ago when you're starting your business, that you'd like to share with the audience?
So I'm glad you kicked it back to me, because this is actually what I was going to share, actually. So, a friend of mine shared with me this TED talk that it was a guy, he was a former drug addict, and the whole presentation was, why do addicts make good business people or good presidents of companies or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but he he taught, and he's, of course, he's gone through 12 steps and all that stuff. And so these concepts are kind of, I guess, loosely based on the first 3 steps of the 12 steps. And it's basically, to be rigorously authentic, to do the hard work, and then release the outcome. And so a friend of mine who showed that to me, and he took the points that this guy had and he turned it into those 3 points. And so that's a term that we use in our office called rad tuartu. So it's rigorously authentic, do the hard work, and release the outcome. And so what what I would encourage others to do, and what I wish I would have known when I started, was, I have to be rigorously authentic with myself, with the people who work with me, with my clients. There's been times where I've had to have really difficult conversations with clients around money, around deadlines, around, and it's like, I think a lot of times, uh, builders that run away from jobs are the people who aren't able to have those difficult conversations, and they don't know how to handle that. So it's like, you have to be able to be rigorously authentic. You have to do the hard work, which is, you're meeting with these people, you're saying what you need to say, and then you're releasing the outcome, and just kind of like, okay, here, and it's a very vulnerable place to be in. But I really, I encourage people to dig into that vulnerability, because I believe that, in general, human nature is to give grace to each other, right? And so there are times when I've tried to do that and I haven't gotten any grace, which I get it. But I would say 75 to 80% of the time, I receive grace back from specifically my clients, where I'm like, hey, this is how I messed up. This is how I'm going to fix it, but this is how I messed up. And I just need some mercy and grace from you. And it has really benefited me with my relationships with clients.
Awesome. Aaron, I really appreciate you coming on, sharing all of this. I know we've unpacked a lot here. You've gone through a lot, but when you look back at what you've been able to accomplish, I mean, you should be very proud of yourself. You've built a great business. You're continuing to deliver great work for your clients. You've got a good team in place. Like, I think it's awesome to just be a fly on the wall here and getting to see how you continue to overcome every single challenge that comes your way, and you're doing it at times where I think other people might have thrown in the towel. You're not sacrificing your client's experience, and you're truly are delivering, what I know you would be proud to have in your own home. Right. You're doing that for your clients, and that shines through. It's very apparent. Your work is top notch, and so I just want to tell you, great job. Keep it up. I'm excited to see where you take the business in the next several years, but I think you've got a very bright future ahead.
Well, the feeling's mutual, and I feel the same way about you guys and you in particular, but just the business in general. And if I wasn't, doing what I do, I'd probably want to work here. So I really love what you guys are doing. So I appreciate you having me on the podcast.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate it, Aaron.
Thanks. All right.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Builder Stories. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and gained valuable insights that can help you in your journey along the way. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave us a review. And as always, if you or someone you know has a story to share, please contact us at builderstories.com. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Eric Fortenberry, and remember, every builder has a unique story. Keep building yours.